everybody. Welcome back to the That's Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Mark Haran. Today's episode is a very interesting one. Personally, I'm a big fan of Dr. Arienne McCracken's research interests and her teaching interests. So this is going to be a fun one, especially for me to discuss. But like always, the That's Awesome podcast is a podcast where we look into what makes awesome at Iowa State University awesome. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Dr. McCracken, for being here today.
Well, thank you.
So Dr. Arienne McCracken currently serves as an assistant teaching professor in the Department of Apparel, Events, and Hospitality Management at Iowa State University. She received her PhD in apparel merchandising and design from Iowa State University, and she also has a master's degree in communication management from USC, as well as MA degrees in both art history and Slavic studies from Ohio State. Prior to her returning for her PhD at Iowa State University, she worked in USC's Center for Effective Organizations, where she researched and wrote about firms organizing for sustainability. And at Center for Effective Organizations, she also had over 10 plus years of experience in managing a variety of special events and executive education programs in across the globe, US, Sweden, and Italy. Some of her research interests include digital entrepreneurship, merchandising and social media, consumer behavior, psychological aspects of dress, sustainability, fat studies, organizational behavior, and professional socialization. And some of her current teaching interests include retail merchandising, product development and manufacturing, styling, digital textile printing, and dress in society. So once again, Dr. McCracken, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to get right into it. There's a lot at Iowa State University, especially awesome, where maybe not a lot of people are knowledgeable about the extensive and very qualified faculty members, including of yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into academia and AMD at Iowa State?
So when I was working at USC, I worked with a research scientist, and we did research and wrote a book on healthcare sustainability. And I really loved working with her, Sue Morman, and just the whole, activity of doing research. And I started to think to myself that maybe, going into academia as a PhD professor might be something that would be, really a good fit for me. And at the same time, I started to realize that there were academics who researched dress and apparel and why people wear what they wear and why society thinks about dress and apparel in the ways that they do. And so I searched around, and Iowa State was the school. Mm-hmm. We had and we still have some amazing scholars in the department, and it was just thrilling to study this and, work on my PhD. And that's why I came to Iowa State.
Sure. And like I said in the beginning, you've been all over the place. You've taught and done education programs in Sweden and Italy. As you were mentioning, you were at USC and Ohio State. What do you enjoy most about teaching here and being an assistant teaching professor here at Iowa State?
This department has some amazingly talented students, and it doesn't matter if it's a design course or the styling course that I teach or business or product development. It's just so satisfying and exciting to see the students create and use their creativity in a variety of ways, designing fabrics or styling photo shoots, and just to see what they come up with it just makes me so happy to see them, create these amazing things and know that they're going to go on in whatever area they want and really do great work. It's just really satisfying for me as a teacher.
Sure. And can you tell the audience again, what courses do you currently teach?
Well, this semester I'm teaching styling and product development, and I also usually teach retail merchandising, which
Okay,
is more of a business kind of focused class.
sure. And this semester specifically, um, how are how are you overcoming the current challenges, as well as trying your best to maximize student learning? Um,
Yeah, it's a weird semester for sure.
sure.
I think I'm just trying to keep in mind that everybody has, normal life issues along with the dealing with the virus. And I'm just trying to, keep that in mind and be as open and flexible as I can.
Hmm.
Because students are trying. It's not that they're not. It's just that there's so much life happening right now for a lot of
Sure.
us. And I just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to get into a little bit about, your research interests and endeavors, especially during a time like this where the topic itself is very interesting and intriguing. Peyton, another communication student in our department that I work with, is an AMD student, and she's taken your class, or I believe she's currently in your classes right now. And she found it interesting how you are currently covering some of the aspects of virtual world in apparel. So without giving too much away, because I know that you are currently involved in some research related projects, could you give us a little insight into what fascinates you or what interests you about the virtual world in apparel?
Well, I got my master's at USC in communication, but focusing on social media and online communities.
Mhm.
So that kind of combined with my apparel studies. And also the fact that I've played online games for many years.
Sure.
I typically play MMOs like World of Warcraft. That's probably the most famous one.
Hmm.
But I also did my dissertation on YouTubers, plus size YouTubers who make fashion and beauty videos. So that's another kind of way of looking at, virtual dress, I guess. But yeah, I've been a gamer for many years, and just myself personally, I have always been interested in making my avatar, my character, look a particular way.
Hmm.
I interviewed several players of Lord of the Rings online, another MMO, about how they felt about their characters. And not everybody, but so many people are very invested in their online characters and what they look like and how they think they should behave.
Hmm.
Some of the folks I interviewed, they had like 40 characters. They had many accounts, 40 characters, and they wrote plays practically to script these characters out. And they had to look a certain way, from hair to whatever, apparel they were wearing. And it's really important to people. And to a certain extent, I think that although we think of clothes as, an extremely physical thing, like dressing ourselves virtually is something that we do for sure in games, because we
Hmm.
have to we have to dress our avatars. And it's just kind of another extension of our identities in a way, I think.
Sure,
It's,
absolutely.
obviously it's a new area to study, so it's really interesting to kind of go in there and talk to other gamers and just see what they think about it.
Hmm. Yeah, from a personal aspect too, I can understand, why you think that way. Because growing up, I'm a huge gamer as well. So I've played my fair share. I'm not a typical, or I'm not an avid, MMO or RPG type player, but I have played games like, I'm not sure if you've heard of like RuneScape.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, games like that. And I do, to an extent, find it interesting, especially now that it's coming to the forefront of gaming. Like, people are becoming more aware of it, that it is an extension of self, and it's also societal and cultural standards, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things mixed in, and it's cool to assess it, especially now that it's come to light. So
Yeah, it's
um,
becoming much more mainstream, I would say, over the last few years for sure.
Sure. So do you think that this trend in the fashion world is going to grow a little bit more? Like I know it's already booming, especially in terms of like when we look at esports. Esports is, a huge industry, and it's only going to go up from here. So.
I mean, it's becoming more and more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
You saw probably recently that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez played on a Twitch game
Mm-hmm.
to kind of promote people registering to vote, and she had, I don't know, 400 plus thousand people watching her stream.
Yeah.
And so that's like really interesting to see politics coming into online gaming streaming, and that just happened recently. So I think it's just going to become more and more integrated really into people's lives, especially since so many of us are staying indoors, recently.
Mm-hmm. What is it to follow up on that Twitch stream? I actually watched that Twitch stream, and it was very entertaining. It's I don't know why people get so invested into big streams like that, but I think it's just it's a cool aspect to see, like, political leaders, or just people that we wouldn't initially assume to do something like that do it, and they hit it out of the park, because I think she's like, her stream itself was a top 3 viewed stream on Twitch, on the platform itself.
Yeah,
And
it was huge.
so yeah, I think it is really interesting to see. So do you think that this creates a new field of work, including video game styling, or maybe more research oriented within the gaming world? Or how does something along the lines of like computer generated apparel separate itself from the regular fashion industry?
Well, it's interesting because it really depends, I think, on the type of game. Like a game like Star Wars: The Old Republic, you can't have Gucci sponsoring something in Star Wars because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But there are games where it's not a science fiction or fantasy game that outside companies could maybe work with the developers. Or back in the day, I think in the early 2000s is when Second Life first started. If you've ever heard of that, it was not a game, but it's certainly a place where people all over the world can get together and build a world and do things and talk together. And they had the ability, players, to design apparel and actually sell it in game, and design like hairstyles and sell them in game. So you had a great deal of freedom with Second Life to really personalize your characters and avatars, and that one certainly had a lot of freedom. Whereas games like Elder Scrolls Online, which I also play, it's sort of a medieval looking game, but there's still a lot of ways to dress your character. It's just not an open system for outside companies or outside designers to really work in. So I think it really depends on the game, but there's definitely a possibility for it.
Do you think that might also be an area of weakness? If those industries continue to grow, and let's say video game styling and fashion became more of a common thing, do you think that it is a possibility that maybe these big companies would try and find their way to seep into those cracks?
I would think so. I mean, I think it would make good sense business-wise. I just know that, especially for Star Wars, Disney is very protective of its intellectual properties. So, I mean, there might be some holdouts that way. But in general, I think, if it makes sense for the game, I think, the developers should look into it for sure.
Sure. And, there's examples of that kind of somewhat right now, with like Fortnite, and all these collaborations that they're doing.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It might just depend on the game, and, we don't know too much. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. So.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely a possibility for the future.
So in terms of the future, what do you see the fashion industry look like, apart from, maybe right now, the virtual world? Or actually, I mean, the virtual world is what we have to consider right now. So what parts of the future do you think will change for the fashion industry, and what do you think will stay the same?
Well, it's interesting because this, the recent developments because of the virus, it really is starting to shake up, business in general, but certainly the apparel businesses, because apparel is so competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I certainly am not a person who can foretell the future, but it will be really interesting to see what the industry is going to look like after, people start going out in public again, and just what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think certainly the trends of athleisure and comfy clothes and casual clothes is certainly not going to go away. It's been part of our culture anyway for a long time.
Sure.
And staying indoors has only kind of intensified that trend. So something like that, that's kind of a mega trend. That certainly is going to be around for a long time.
Sure.
But beyond that, I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. And currently, as the future continues to change, once again, there's going to be that increase in students becoming more aware and maybe more interested in areas that not only pertain to the physical, apparel fashion industry, like what we like in society have, but also like the virtual world and stuff like that. So how do you think AESHM is preparing the next generation of students for these different types of worlds and areas?
Well, I think we have a really well-rounded undergraduate major.
Mm-hmm.
And, depending on what the student wants to go into, really, there are just so many ways the student can go. They can, study abroad when times are normal, and, do internships and really follow their passions. So, again, I think it's just really up to the student and their interests. We give them a good grounding, but then they can kind of fly in whichever direction they are interested in.
Sure. Absolutely. So what would your advice be to students who are currently looking at, the apparel, fashion, textile, clothing industries?
I would say, don't be intimidated, follow your passion, and have a good point of view. I think one of the most important things is to have an opinion. Certainly in styling, you definitely need to have an opinion. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean there's a right or wrong to anything, but you have to go forward and, make your presence known in a respectful way, but certainly make your presence known and be original, and get out there and try and do what you love.
Sure. And this is the best time to do it, for every industry. This is really a wake up call to say, hey, if you're considering pursuing something new, like, now is the time, because it's only going to change from here. So
yeah. And why major in something that you don't totally love?
Exactly. I agree. Well, that is all I have. Dr. McCracken, thank you for your presence and your insights in this great, awesome episode.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Once again, everybody, if you haven't tuned into the AESHM podcast before, we have podcasts each week. For more information about the AESHM podcast, as well as the department itself, you can head over to awesome.hs.iastate.edu, or you can just look us up on social media, AESHM, AESHM at ISU. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.